Good morning, Corky Alexander here in Hamilton, Alabama. Doing some ministry talks at this time. Uh, this one is about formal training, and I'm going to kind of touch on some of the issues, and questions that people have. These video talks that I give, for the most part, are for legacy, so that in years to come, after I pass away, people can look at these and see what my ideas were on these subjects, because I don't want to always bore people in person telling stories. But an old man, it's mostly what he does. He tells stories. And so uh, I thought formal training would be a good topic, because it's very controversial right now with the state of education and the way things are. We begin to see in recent years ministers, missionaries, and all types of people, not just in the religious world, but in the mainstream of education, begin to move from going to you know high level schools to finding cheaper online degrees. And certainly the internet, we say thank you to Nikola Tesla. So the internet obviously is more convenient in doing courses online, and both Kim and I have been online professors for a number of years, so we certainly need the work. So if I say anything negative about online education, there's no choices about it. I mean, people just can't drop their lives and come to some campus, always. But I want to point out that something that usually people that are critics of educated clergy don't don't say and don't know, and that is that many of us did this for God. It was a sacrifice we made for God. I certainly had no desire to be a shrink or a nerd in my life. I just wanted to be a, Southern rock guy. Uh, but I did it for God. And I was not a natural student. I grew up as a clown, performer, all of this amateur, nothing, professional musician. And but when I became acquainted with Christianity and the idea of Jesus Christ, I realized it's tied up in a book, and that book is stems from centuries old manuscripts that are located all over the world, and we don't actually have any original manuscripts of Scripture, but we have copies of copies. And so I was interested in it. Uh, the lawnmowers are going to run me crazy out here today, because in Alabama, as in Tennessee, mowing is a sacrament. Okay. You see these guys with these lowboy trailers with a huge riding lawnmower on it and all these weed eaters hanging on racks. You think you're looking at a landscaper. You're not. You're looking at just a guy who's going to cut his mother's yard. It's a real big deal here, and I'm sure it is in other places out there. Um, but like, we begin to see ministers uh, attend schools studying under uh, professors that did not agree with their faith or agree with their expression of faith. Um, I was in Arby's one day, I think it was, and got behind these two men, and one said, "How was church today?" He said, "It was fine." He said, "Where did you go to church?" He said, "I went to the Lutheran church." He said, "I thought you went to the Baptist church." He said, "I did, but I found I could get out of the parking lot 5 minutes earlier if I attended the Lutheran church." So he was able to change his entire uh, dogmatic beliefs just for getting out of church early. So we have these people who will submit themselves and study under scholars that they absolutely don't agree with, but just to do it because it's cheaper. And certainly, and I owe thousands of dollars for my doctorate degree, so I have nothing but sympathy for people who can't afford to, go to school. Um, but you know, you have to know that it's done out of love. Study should always be an act of worship to God in that context, and not seen as a means to an end, or something that's going to prepare you to get more money. You're studying it because it's wonderful. And so, and this is true in all fields. Also, not only is there this element of personal sacrifice in doing difficult academic work, but there is also the doors that it opens for you, because many opportunities, jobs, ministry positions, and so forth like that might require a degree. And of course, the majority of the evangelicals are going to punch out at that point and say, "Oh, he's going to backslide if he goes to college." And I heard this when I was a boy, being raised in the Baptist church. Um, One of our young men in the church went off to seminary, and I remember the church members talking about him, saying, "Well, he's lost his faith going off to that school because they teach liberal beliefs and all of that." So, um, I don't know which would be more dangerous, attending a seminary or university, or just, filling your life with talk radio. I don't know which would be worse. Um, the other, the other point about why formal training is great is because the only other alternative pretty much you have is reading popular books, and then just um, cutting and pasting what somebody said, uh, and using it yourself. And I had one student tell me, "Isn't that scholarship?" No, it's not. Um, you got to be saying something yourself. You got to be something. There's got to be something that you're going to say. So you know, if all you do is read popular books, and that's pretty much the only alternative to formal studies, and you got to get that college out of the way before you go to seminary, grad school. I mean, you might do a bachelor's degree like I did, which is in pastoral ministries, and have all the counseling classes and all of that, and stop there. You can stop there. But the fact of the matter is, you've only been introduced to the Old Testament. You've only been introduced to the New Testament in, undergraduate. uh, you've taken these first courses, whereas when you go to seminary, then you can actually delve into those areas. Get all your sciences and your English and your sociology and those courses. Get them out of the way in your undergrad. Um, then there's the whole um, world of people that are just going to go to Bible college, and there are some good ones out there. Uh, when I was in Oklahoma for a few years, I made friends with a bunch of pastors, and most of them out there attended Rhema Bible College under Hagins, and out east in the southeast, those of us that are classic Pentecostals, had a great deal of criticism for the Word of Faith movement, Hagen and all that, because we had a lot of excesses out here. But when I got to Oklahoma and actually saw what Rhema had become, I was quite impressed with the level of training that these pastors had received. But that's all they did, was that Bible college degree. Now, if you're interested at all in exegesis, in other words, the interpretation of Scripture, utilizing biblical languages and grammatical sources, if you're interested in deep study that way, you're going to have to get that bachelor's out of the way and get on to your MA or Master of Divinity, your what we call graduate level. And that's where the MD of the Master of Divinity, which I have, is the pastor's degree. You take counseling classes in that introduce you to all of the theories that you just touched on in psychology in your undergrad. In the grad, you actually take counseling classes where you become more knowledgeable of the theories. You say, well, I'm not interested in theory. I'm interested in doing the work. Well, you can't do the work if you don't understand the theories, because you are following some theory, but you just don't know what you're following, and that's very dangerous, because you're going to apply some things and do some things. There's going to be some practices that are going to result out of your work. You're not going to know where in the world that comes from, and they all stem from some historical theory that an individual came up with. I did a lot of marriage and family therapy training in my master's level, and I did consider briefly maybe becoming a board certified marriage and family therapist, but I didn't want to be a shrink. I didn't want to be stuck in a room with people all day long, so I didn't do that. But what it did for me was it acquainted me with the theories, so that when I became a pastor and a couple would come to me, then when they told me their issues, that would lead me to a theory, and I could find a referral in town of a licensed marriage and family therapist to refer them to, who followed the theory that is going to be best for them. For example, if it was just an all-American couple that are pretty generic and evangelical types, and they were having marriage trouble, if I was going to refer them to a marriage and family therapist, it would probably be someone who followed the Bowen theory or Bowenian. And I've done this before. I've done it a number of times. Because when you're a pastor of a congregation, if you have a couple that has marriage problems come to you for counseling, and they tell all their dirt to you, you're going to lose them from your church, because they're not going to sit in there on Sunday mornings or Sunday night and in front of you and all that bad stuff. They're going to actually go to another church. So I saved my couples by referring them to a counselor across town, and they would go over there for counseling, come back to me. I didn't know the dirt. I just ministered them on a very basic level, and I think that was ideal. And I didn't have to take on the whole world of being some kind of counselor or something like that. So even if you're going to make referrals, you need to be acquainted with the theories, and that's what college and seminary do for you. It introduces you to the psychology world, and that's just one example. Some pastors do a business administration degree, like an MBA, rather than doing a seminary degree, because they say the church is a business. So if you don't want to be a bean counter, go ahead. I mean, that's fine. I'm glad I know people who are knowledgeable in business. I certainly am not. I'm not your guy on business. So I'm far too, spontaneous and impulsive to be able to, stuff myself in a box and do business and bouncing money and all that. And The other thing is, in the college, and if you do an online degree, this probably won't be in there. It's one of those deep classes, parliamentary procedure. And so when you start having board meetings or start chairing board meetings, the purpose of parliamentary law is to limit discussion. You want to have some discussion, but you don't want some guy taking over the meeting and, destroying what you're trying to do. And so parliamentary procedure, knowledge of that allows you to um, control the meeting to a point where people can express themselves, but you can get the work done. If you don't know that, and you're just letting them be an open ended, you're going to be there till 10 o'clock at night, and some crazy guy's going to be dominating and take you places you don't want to go, keep you longer than you want to stay. Well, I mean, so parliamentary procedure, so I won't use that. That's what people say about formal education, is it? A lot of that stuff I won't use. Well, fact of the matter is, if people were more trained in sociology, history, psychology, uh, it would make a big difference in their political persuasion. It would make a big difference in the way they watch the news. They would understand what they're watching on the news. They would understand the Palestinian situation. And if you just read popular Christian books that are all just pro-Israel and you never hear anything about Palestinians, or you never see them in the Bible, nobody's ever pointed out to you, that's the other side of the thing, then you're ignorant of that and you're just going to go with the flow of whatever popular opinion is. And that's just not what we are about. Um, so that's some thoughts on formal education. These are going to go real long, but I'll pick up again in a few minutes and we'll see where that goes. Thank you so much.